In 1953, the CIA trained cats to spy on the Soviets, tiny microphones on their backs, but fur-licking chaos ensued. Operation Acorn aimed to exploit cats' stealth, believing their silent movements could bypass Soviet surveillance. Yet, their obsession with grooming exposed them. Microphones picked up fur-licking sounds, not secrets. The Cold War's most bizarre spy had a tiny, very confused ego, prioritizing self-grooming over espionage. Despite the feline chaos, the CIA's plan was shelved until modern tech made whisker-based surveillance possible. The CIA's logic: cats are stealthy, curious, and have zero interest in politics, except when it involves tuna. They tested 12 cats, all of whom were named after spy gadgets: Whisker 1, Paws 2, and one guy who just stared at the ceiling and refused to move. The cats wore microphones, the size of a marble, attached to harnesses that looked like they'd been designed by a 1950s fashion nightmare. The plan was simple: drop the cats near Soviet embassies, let them explore, and hope the microphones picked up secrets. The problem? Cats don't care about espionage. They care about nap time, laser pointers, and knocking over anything that smells like a human. One cat, codenamed Mittens 7, spent 3 hours staring at a potted plant before finally deciding it was a good place to nap. The CIA's analysts were baffled. "This isn't a spy mission," one muttered. "It's a cat's version of a mindfulness retreat." The CIA's brainwave. Operation Acorn. Yep, the same folks who once tried to sell LSD to communists in 1962. In 1953, they thought cats were the ultimate spies because nothing screams "I'm here to steal secrets" like a tabby with a tiny microphone on its back. Director Waffle believed cats could sneak into Soviet embassies, like a ninja in a catnip-induced fugue. The plan: equip them with miniature microphones, tiny cameras, and a sense of purpose so strong they'd probably report back even if they got stuck in a toilet. The cats were hand-picked, mostly from alleyways, shelters, and one guy's basement who accidentally bred a litter of hyperactive calicos. They were dubbed Agent Whiskers, Sir Paws a Lot, and the Great Meow. Training involved bribing them with tuna, teaching them to walk on treadmills, and pretending to be a giant, sweaty human who screamed meow at them. The CIA's logic: cats are low-key, high-impact. They wouldn't raise suspicion unless you're a Soviet guard who hears a meow echoing from a ventilation shaft. One cat, Operation Whisker 2, was trained to press a button that released a smoke bomb. The CIA hoped it would look like a fire alarm. Instead, it looked like a cat had just joined a punk band. The program's budget: $2.3 million in 1953 dollars, roughly $20 million today. For what? A bunch of cats who probably just wanted to nap in sunbeams and chase laser dots. But hey, at least they didn't have to deal with the bureaucratic nightmare of hiring actual spies. The cat's mission: infiltrate, eavesdrop, maybe even steal a sandwich. Their greatest failure? They all got distracted by a single suspiciously tasty tuna can left in a Soviet embassy. The Cold War just got a lot more feline. The CIA's idea of training cats was less Mission Impossible and more Cat Fancy magazine's worst nightmare. They called it Operation Acorn because nothing says sneaky espionage like a nut that's also a spy. The cats? Well, they were allegedly recruited from the Washington, D.C. Pound, though one memo later called them the most uncooperative agent since the guy who tried to smuggle a toaster into the UN. The plan was simple: attach microphones to their collars, teach them to stroll into Soviet embassies, and hope they didn't get eaten by a Russian. Problem: cats are not trained like Navy SEALs. They're trained like your ex, who still texts you lol after you block them. The CIA's first attempt involved a cat named Whiskers, who immediately knocked over a microphone, ate it, and then tried to lick the CIA's budget director. The trainers, a mix of former CIA operatives and people who had too much time on their hands. One memo referred to them as the Bob Ross of spycraft, except instead of painting happy little trees, they painted happy little cats, who then proceeded to knock over everything. One cat, Sir Posselot, was so bad at the mission that he accidentally triggered a smoke alarm in a Soviet embassy by knocking over a candle. The Soviets, meanwhile, thought it was a terrorist attack. The microphones? They looked like something out of a 1950s horror movie. One agent described them as the audio equivalent of a disco ball. The cats, of course, hated them. One cat named Lady Meow spent 3 weeks refusing to wear the collar until she finally did, and then immediately ran into a wall. The CIA's files later called her the most tragic spy in history, or the most tragic cat in history, depending on who you ask. By 1954, the program was a disaster. The cats had more personality than the entire Soviet leadership, and the microphones kept falling off. One memo summed it up best. We're not training spies. We're training cats. And they're not interested in espionage. They're interested in tuna, the next part of this story. Well, let's just say the CIA's cats didn't exactly go out with a bang. The program collapsed when one cat got stuck in a Soviet embassy air vent and started meowing loudly, which was about as subtle as a neon sign saying, "Spy here." "This is a disaster," hissed Director Alan Dulles, staring at the security footage like it had personally insulted his entire family tree. The cat in question, codenamed Operation Acorn Star Recruit, had somehow managed to climb into the air vent, probably because it thought it was a giant cat tree. "It's not a failure," snapped a CIA analyst, trying to sound professional while facepalming. "It's a creative misdirection." The Soviets, meanwhile, were like, "Wait, is this a cat or a giant, furry protest sign?" They called in a team of engineers, a jazz band, and a guy who claimed to be a professional whisperer. "The cat won't stop meowing," the engineer groaned. "It's like it's got a megaphone and a vendetta." The fiasco made headlines in Pravda under the headline, "Americans Send Furry Agents to Our Air Vents." What next? "We're not sending agents," the CIA tried to clarify. "We're sending cats." The cat, now a local celebrity in Moscow, was eventually rescued by a kid who'd been sneaking snacks into the embassy. He named it Mr. Bradad Whiskers and started a TikTok account. "This is the most embarrassing thing since the time we tried to use a duck as a surveillance drone," muttered a disgraced CIA officer. The program was officially shut down in 1954, though not before the cats caused a total of 17 air vent blockages, 3 diplomatic incidents, and a 20-minute jam session by the Soviet jazz band. "At least the ducks didn't start a TikTok trend," someone said. The legacy? The CIA's cat spy program didn't exactly end with a bang, it ended with a very loud meow. The fiasco left a mess. Dozens of cats, a handful of broken Soviet air vents, and a ton of embarrassed officials who suddenly realized they'd spent millions on a scheme that looked like a pet store's worst nightmare. The Soviets, meanwhile, were less than thrilled. They didn't know whether to laugh or call in the KGB's Feline Division. But here's the kicker: the cats' incompetence became a legend. Their microphones, useless. Their stealth, zero. Their ability to cause chaos, unmatched. One cat, codenamed Whiskers, famously got stuck in a Moscow embassy air vent and started yowling like a human at a rock concert. The Soviets, thinking it was a prank, tried to shoo it out with a broom. It hissed. They called in the CIA. The CIA called in a guy with a vacuum cleaner. It was like a scene from a movie nobody wanted to watch. Fast forward to today, the cats are gone, but their legacy lives on. Every time you see a cat meme about spying or stealing your spot on the couch, you're indirectly thanking Whiskers and his feline co-conspirators. The CIA. They're still around, but now they're more careful. They've learned their lesson: never trust a cat with a microphone, or a human with a budget. And that's the real story.